Hey there. You know, when it comes to work was part of God's design all along. You know, God put Adam in the Garden of Eden at the very beginning. Before anything went wrong, he put him there specifically to work it and take care of it. In fact, Genesis 2:15, this is what it says. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. So this verse, it shows that God gave Adam a purpose before there was anything wrong in the world, any pain, any frustration. And he put him with that purpose to go and work and to care for what he had put in his hands. You know, it's a good question to think about right now. What has God placed in our hands for the purpose that we were meant to do in our life? Because it's the original concept of work was not a punishment. God intended us human beings to be productive. Work's part of it was always part of our design that he had for us, not a curse for doing wrong. Now, when sin came into the world, it did indeed make work harder. We would feel pain, we'd sweat, we'd be frustrated from time to time. Our days would be full. There would be moments where we toil in our work. But the original concept, God always had a purpose for us to work. He didn't just put Adam in the garden to relax and enjoy it. He put him there to serve, to manage, to protect it. And just that fact in itself, it shows a few things about God. God created us with responsibility, not to be lazy. He created us with purpose and not an empty filled life. Now the two main parts of that verse, to work it and to take care of it, shows that God values labour, and he also values the concept of stewardship, where we look after what God has given us, because we're not the owners of anything. We're the caretakers of what God's given us. And whether that's in your job or your family, in your home, even our health and the talent that God's given us, it's all something that we are meant to work and take care of. Since I've stated that God values, work matters to God. It doesn't matter whether you're a tradesman, whether you work in an office, whether you work at home, even on the weekend you might be in an activity you love, or even at church. Our daily efforts can be an act of worship when it's done faithfully and with a willing heart. Because God's not impressed by status. I remember my dad, he worked for many years in the joinery, and there's even a piece of furniture in our house today that my dad made as a coffee table. And he took very seriously making furniture and things. Like over the years, he fitted out places with the kitchens and many other things that the internal fittings of a house. But he also went to work. Everybody knew he was a Christian, and one of those guys was a guy that he worked with was a guy called Kenny Schaefer. And Kenny, he left that work at a certain, I think around 1980. About 8 years later, my dad got a phone call saying that Kenny was going to get baptised at a nearby Baptist church. And what had happened was Kenny had gone through rough times, and he said, I've got to get back, I've got to go to church, and I've got to connect with God, because I work with this bloke, Albert Screen, and he lived by what he said. And God, in that sense, rewarded my dad's faithfulness of going to work, because sometimes he was probably sledged for being a Christian at work by at least one person at his work. But he just kept going to work. When somebody asked him a question, he would answer that question on how he would deal with it as a Christian. And that's what we are meant to do. Just like Adam was put in a garden to work it and take care of it, God has given us a purpose, each and every one of us, to go and work and take care of it. A simple application of what I'm trying to say here is something like this. Always try and do, always try and work well. Always try and keep everything that, not just the tools that you use, but the work environment that you use, keep it in good order. As if, especially if it's stuff that you've been given to use by your work, treat it as if it's your own. Because, we're all called to do something. I mean, in this case, that calling has a purpose. At this very early stage in human history, Adam was given the task of looking after the Garden of Eden and working it. Now, what might that mean, on a daily basis? Well, I would say pray before you work a shift. I used to pray. There was a time when I worked in a team, and our supervisor worked alongside us, and I always used to pray before I got to work, on the drive into work, pray that he would lead us well. So that, and also, that I always have an answer, because I used to get, at that particular work, I used to really get inundated with questions when I least expect it. You might be in a situation where, you might be a sole trader, and, you got clients, and, they might be coming to you. You never know when they might come to you with their problems. In fact, the service that you provide might be the very thing that they need peace of mind in, with all the things that they are dealing with. All those things, we live in a complicated world. It gets a little bit more complicated every day. This is a perfect opportunity at the start of every workday to pray for guidance. The other times there are probably other times where it's time, you have seasons at a job, and there may be that season may come to an end. Those sort of things, They need time to listen. You need time to listen to God. So think about those other times where you need to sit down and just listen to God. I remember our youth pastor, Ross Spritzer, he used to talk about how he used to love getting up early in the morning, maybe a Saturday morning, just go up to the beach around Newcastle, one of the beaches around Newcastle, and just listen to God. And I remember thinking, one day I want to be like that. And over time, there were moments in my work and in my leisure where I just had nothing to really, I didn't have much to concentrate on. And I ended up taking those opportunities to listen to God, all that deep thinking. And it really all just works together as God guides us through our life. And I suppose it takes one act of obedience after another. I would say to you, wherever you are at right now, in any, whether you're starting a job, whether you've been in a job for a long time, whether you need a change of career, take time to pray with God, ask for guidance, and think about, as you do that, think about what God has given you and where He's going to take you in the future. You have a good day, and we'll see you in the next video.